In the quiet heart of Paris, a young scientist worked long into the night, surrounded by glass flasks, notebooks, and determination. She was about to uncover something that would change the world forever. Years later, that same woman would sit silently in the audience as her husband and a colleague accepted the Nobel Prize. At that time, women weren't even allowed on the stage. Yet it was her discovery, her brilliance, and her sacrifice that would light the path for modern medicine and save countless lives. She gave everything for her work, even her life. Let's turn the clock back to meet the woman who lit up the world, Marie Curie. When Marie Curie was born on November 7, 1867, no one could have foreseen that this baby would grow up to become the first woman to earn a Nobel Prize, and later the first woman to win 2 Nobel Prizes in science. Marie was born in an apartment on Freta Street in Warsaw, Poland, a country under Russian rule at the time. Her given name was Maria Salomea Sklodowska, though her family affectionately called her Maina. Her mother, Bronislava Boguska Sklodowska, was the headmistress of a small private girls' school located in the same building where Marie's family lived. Her father, Vladislav Sklodowski, was a physicist and teacher. The couple married in 1860, and within the next 7 years they would have 5 children. Marie was the youngest of her 4 siblings. She had 3 sisters, Sophia, called Zofia, Bronislava, called Bronia, and Helena, called Hella, and a brother, Joseph, called Joseph. The year after Marie's birth, her father was offered a better position at a boys' high school, which included an apartment. The entire family moved, but this new location was too far from Marie's mother's job, so she chose to give up her role as headmistress. Instead, she decided to homeschool her 2 eldest children. Marie, always close by, had the opportunity to learn to read, a skill she mastered at the age of 4. Marie's mother had been ill since Marie was a baby. By 1871, when Marie was just 5 years old, her mother's condition worsened. She was losing weight and suffered from a persistent cough, symptoms that led to a diagnosis of tuberculosis, TB, a disease affecting the lungs. At the time, it was believed that fresh air and less stress would help treat TB, so her mother spent long periods away from the family seeking recovery. Today, TB is treated with a lengthy and aggressive course of antibiotics. Unfortunately, these trips did not improve her health. In 1874, according to Marie's daughter Eve Curie, 2 of Marie's sisters, Zofia and Bronislava, Bronia, contracted typhus, a bacterial infection transmitted by fleas and lice. They had caught it from one or more of the boys who were staying in their home, which their father had turned into a boarding house. While Bronia survived, Zofia tragically passed away. This loss devastated Marie's mother, and despite continuing to leave home for TB treatments, she did not recover. Her mother, Bronislava Boguska Sklodowska, died in 1878, when Marie was just 11 years old. Chapter 3. Graduation, but no future. These devastating events in Marie's early years left a deep and lasting impact on her life. It is said that she never fully recovered from the loss of her mother's love and continued to miss her sister dearly. To cope with her grief, Marie buried herself in her studies, working extremely hard. Her dedication paid off when she graduated with a diploma at the age of 15 in 1883. In those days, women rarely went on to university or college. Most young women married instead, but Marie dreamed of continuing her education. Although Warsaw University did not accept women at the time, there were other possibilities. Women could study abroad, in places like St. Petersburg, Russia, or Paris, France. Unfortunately, these opportunities required money she didn't have. Without a clear direction for her future, Marie became deeply depressed. Her thoughts often returned to the loss of her mother and sister. Noticing his daughter's declining health and spirit, her father decided to send her to visit her mother's brothers, a change that proved to be exactly what Marie needed. Surrounded by family and a new environment, she began to heal, both physically and emotionally. That year, she learned to dance and attended many balls with her friends. When Marie returned to Warsaw, she and her sister Hella were invited to stay with one of their mother's former pupils, the Comtesse de Fleury, where they spent time swimming and boating on her beautiful estate. At the end of summer, Marie and Hella returned home to their father, who had moved from the small boarding house to a modest apartment. Though he was earning money from teaching, it wasn't enough to send all three of his children to university. Władysław Sklodowski chose to send his son Józef, who wanted to be a doctor, to medical school to study medicine. Marie and her sister Bronia often talked about their future. Both wanted to dedicate their lives to serving Poland, and both dreamed of studying science in Paris. Together, they devised a plan. Marie would work as a governess to earn money and help fund Bronia's education in Paris. In return, once Bronia became a doctor, she would support Marie so that she could pursue her own studies. In 1886, Marie became a governess for the Żurawski family. They treated her decently, but did not consider her an equal. This became especially clear when Marie and the Żurawskis' son, Kazimierz, returned from university, and the two fell in love. When Kazimierz told his parents that he wanted to marry Marie, they refused to allow it, insisting that he could never marry a poor governess with no land or social standing. Heartbroken, but practical, Marie continued her work. She needed her income to keep sending money to Bronia. In 1889, Marie left the Żurawski household and began working for another wealthy family, the Fuchs. However, this job didn't last long, as her father had become the director of a reform school for young offenders, a difficult but well-paid position. With his improved finances, he was finally able to repay Marie for the money she had sent to Bronia. By 1890, Bronia, now a doctor of gynecology and obstetrics, urged Marie to come to Paris the following year. While waiting, Marie conducted experiments in her cousin's laboratory and considered what field she wanted to pursue. Finally, in late 1891, she left for Paris to study at the Sorbonne. There, she made two life-changing decisions. The first was to study physics, and the second was to change her name from Maria to Marie. She would keep that name for the rest of her life. While Bronia was studying medicine, she married a fellow doctor, Kazimierz Dłuski. Marie stayed with them when she arrived in Paris. However, Bronia's husband, a vocal socialist, disagreed with Marie's strong belief in positivism, the idea that science and reason could improve society. Their home was also too noisy and crowded for studying, and Marie wanted to practice speaking French, while the Dłuskis and their friends mostly spoke Polish. Eventually, Marie moved into a series of less than modest rooms in the Latin Quarter of Paris, where many students lived, tiny attics and single rooms, most with no heat, that offered little comfort but great freedom. She would return to Poland during the summers to visit her family. The University of the Sorbonne had long been known for its religious roots, but by the 1890s, science had taken center stage. It was a time of optimism. People believed that through study and discovery, science could help solve the world's greatest problems. When Marie arrived in Paris to study, the odds were stacked against her. Out of 1,800 students studying science at the Sorbonne, only 23 were women, and she was the very first woman ever to study physics there. Most professors didn't take her seriously. Many believed women could never be as intelligent or hard-working as men. But Marie was determined to prove them wrong. She studied from dawn to midnight, often in freezing rooms, sometimes skipping meals to save money for textbooks. Every exam, every experiment became a quiet battle to earn respect in a place that didn't think she belonged. In July 1893, all that perseverance paid off. Marie graduated first in her class, ahead of every man who had doubted her. A year later, with the help of a scholarship campaign for women's education, she returned to the Sorbonne to earn a second degree, this time in mathematics. Those years in Paris were not just about learning science. They were about surviving, proving herself, and finding purpose. They shaped the woman who would one day uncover forces powerful enough to change and even save lives around the world. It was still 1894. Marie had been offered a position in Paris that kept her from returning to Poland to visit her family. The grant she received was just enough to cover a small apartment and food. Her new job was with the French Society for the Encouragement of Industry, where she was asked to study the magnetic properties of different types of steel. There was one problem. There wasn't enough laboratory space for her to work in. A friend suggested she reach out to a physicist who might be able to help. That physicist was Pierre Curie, the head of the laboratory at the Paris School of Industrial Physics and Chemistry. Marie and Pierre's first meeting was not the start of a love story, not yet. Marie found him to be a bit of a dreamer and thought he seemed very young. In truth, he was 9 years older than she was. Pierre was quiet and thoughtful, often misunderstood because of his shyness. As a boy, he had been homeschooled by his father, a doctor who taught him to look closely at the invisible, to see beyond what the eye could perceive. Pierre and his brother Jacques, a professor of chemistry, had already made remarkable discoveries studying quartz crystals, work that would later lead to innovations like microphones, quartz watches, and even early TV technology. Pierre's school allowed him the freedom to explore any research he wished, and research was his passion. Before meeting Marie, Pierre once said that women of genius are rare. That belief would soon be tested. From the moment he saw Marie's determination and intellect, he was captivated. He proposed marriage not long after they met, but Marie hesitated. She cared for him, but she also felt a deep loyalty to Poland. She planned to finish her degrees in Paris, then return home to teach. When summer came, she returned to Poland to visit her father, brother, and sister. During her visit, Pierre wrote her many heartfelt letters, sharing his feelings, his dreams, and his hopes for the work they could accomplish together. He told her she had no right to give up on science, that her talent was meant to be shared with the world. In one letter, he wrote that they should be together to explore all their dreams, scientific, humanitarian, and patriotic. Marie was convinced. She returned to Paris. Pierre sent her what he thought was a perfectly romantic gift, a signed copy of his latest paper, On Symmetry in Physical Phenomena, Symmetry of an Electric Field and of a Magnetic Field. She was smitten. On July 26, 1895, Marie and Pierre were married in a simple civil ceremony at Sceaux City Hall. The celebration took place in the Curies' garden. For their honeymoon, they bought 2 bicycles with money given by a cousin and spent their days pedaling through the French countryside. When they settled into a small apartment on the left bank, an area known for its bohemian spirit and intellectual life, they bought only a few second-hand pieces of furniture. Marie refused to clutter the apartment. She wanted to focus on her research, not housework. Their dining table served as their desk. Pierre, now a doctor of science, supported them by giving lectures on electricity while continuing his own research on crystals. Marie worked beside him, preparing to become a teacher while also continuing her studies in physics and her research into steel and magnetism. It was a modest life, but one filled with curiosity, partnership, and purpose. Neither of them knew it yet, but the discoveries they would make together would change the world. In 1897, Marie's life changed once again. She was expecting her first child. The pregnancy was difficult. There were days when she was so ill that she could barely move, and for a time, her research had to stop. On September 12, 1897, she gave birth to a daughter, delivered by her father-in-law. They named her Irene, a child who would one day follow in her mother's footsteps and win a Nobel Prize of her own. Just 15 days after Irene's birth, tragedy struck. Pierre's mother passed away. The small family, along with Pierre's father, moved to a new home together. The elder Dr. Curie became a steady presence in their lives, helping with baby Irene and even sharing in the housework so Marie could return to her studies. Back in the lab, Marie Curie was inspired by Henri Becquerel's discovery that uranium gave off invisible rays of energy. Curious to learn more, she began studying these mysterious forces and soon coined the term radioactivity to describe them. This breakthrough would later set her on the path to finding polonium and radium. But there was something even more powerful hidden within the waste material of the uranium ore mining called pitchblende, something no one had ever seen. The mining waste was even more radioactive than in its original form. In a leaky wooden shed that once stored medical equipment, Marie and Pierre Curie spent endless days and nights separating the elements hidden in pitchblende. The fumes burned their lungs, the chemicals ate through their clothes, but their determination never faded. Marie's dream was clear: find the invisible source of that powerful glow. In July of 1898, they announced the discovery of a new element, polonium, named in honor of Marie's homeland, Poland. Just 5 months later came an even greater triumph: radium, a new element that glowed softly in the dark and was more powerful than uranium itself. The world was astonished, and so were the Curies. To isolate just 1 gram of radium, Marie processed tons of pitchblende by hand. Her back ached, her skin burned, and her lab coat glowed faintly from the radiation. But she pressed on. Knowledge, she believed, belonged to everyone. She refused to patent her discoveries. A few inventions and discoveries during Marie Curie's lifetime. Dmitri Mendeleev, 1869, presented the periodic table of elements. Alexander Graham Bell, 1876, made the world's first telephone call. Louis Pasteur, 1885, developed a vaccination for rabies. Carl Benz, 1885, built the first gasoline-powered automobile. Nikola Tesla, 1888, invented the AC motor and transformer. George Eastman, 1888, introduced the Kodak camera, photography for everyone. Wilhelm Röntgen, 1895, discovered mysterious new rays, later called X-rays. Henri Becquerel, 1896, discovered radioactivity. The Curies would build on this to find polonium and radium. Albert Einstein, 1905, published The Theory of Special Relativity. Ernest Rutherford, 1911, discovered the atomic nucleus, unlocking the atom's secrets. It took Marie over 3 more years to isolate pure radium chloride, but by 1903, Marie's relentless research had paid off. In June of that year, she presented her groundbreaking thesis on radioactivity to the professors of the Sorbonne, earning the title of Doctor of Physics, the first woman in France ever to do so. That same year, in November, her achievements reached international recognition. The Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded jointly to Marie Curie, Pierre Curie, and Henri Becquerel for their groundbreaking work on radioactivity. But it almost didn't happen that way. When the Nobel Committee first announced its nominations, Marie's name was missing. The assumption had been that Pierre had done most of the work. Pierre refused to accept the honor unless Marie was properly recognized. Thanks to his insistence, her name was added, and history was corrected. Because of Marie's health, she was expecting her second child and not feeling well enough to travel. The couple delayed their trip to Sweden to receive the prize. Their second daughter, Eve Denise Curie, was born on December 6, 1904. Interesting fact: Marie Curie's daughters, Irène Joliot-Curie, 1935, received the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, along with her husband, Frédéric Joliot-Curie, for their discovery of artificial radioactivity. Died at age 58. Eve Curie, 1937, published a biography of her mother, and went on to become a successful journalist and humanitarian. Died at age 102. In June of 1905, the Curies finally travelled to Stockholm to attend the Nobel ceremony. Yet, even in triumph, society's bias was clear. Pierre and Henri Becquerel delivered the acceptance speeches, while Marie, whose discoveries had changed science forever, sat quietly in the audience. Pierre's speech included the statement, "Humankind will derive more good than harm from new discoveries," acknowledging the fact that he hoped the good would outweigh the bad. Interesting fact: the story behind the Nobel Prize. Swedish inventor Alfred Nobel made his fortune from inventions like dynamite and held hundreds of patents. Many people tell a famous story that Alfred Nobel was inspired to fund the Nobel Prizes after reading a mistaken obituary calling him a merchant of death because of his invention of dynamite. While this specific obituary hasn't been definitively verified, it reflects a real tension in Nobel's life. He created powerful explosives, yet wanted his legacy to honor humanity. In his last will, 1895, he directed most of his wealth to fund a set of annual prizes for those who conferred the greatest benefit on mankind. The first Nobel Prizes were awarded in 1901 in physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, and peace. The Nobel Peace Prize is awarded in Oslo, Norway, per Nobel's will, while all other categories are awarded in Stockholm, Sweden. All are awarded on December 10th each year, which is Alfred Nobel's birthday. The following year brought heartbreak. On April 19, 1906, Paris was soaked in rain. Pierre was walking along a crowded street, his mind, as always, deep in thought. Distracted by the umbrellas around him, he stepped off the curb and into the path of a heavy, horse-drawn wagon. The wheels crushed him instantly. He was only 46 years old. When Pierre's father received the news, he could only whisper through his tears, what was he dreaming of this time? Marie was devastated. The man who had been her partner in life and discovery, her truest friend, was gone. Heartbroken, Marie poured her grieving heart and soul into her work, becoming the first woman to teach at the Sorbonne, taking over her husband's professorship. Even in her grief, she would not stop. From that sorrow would rise one of the greatest scientific legacies the world has ever known. My husband and I were so closely united by our affection and our common work that we passed nearly all of our time together. Marie Curie. 4 years later, in the spring of 1910, Marie began a love affair with Paul Langevin, her and Pierre's close friend, and a married man. Paul's wife, Jeanne, arranged for someone to break into the small apartment they shared and stole love letters while they were away. Those letters were leaked to the press. When the story broke, France was stunned. Jeanne physically attacked Marie, threatened to kill her, and even urged neighbors to throw stones at her home. Fearing for her safety, Marie and her children fled the town. In October 1911, Marie won her second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry, for discovering radium and polonium. But when the Nobel Committee heard about the scandal, they told her not to come to Sweden to accept the award. Marie was furious and went anyway. She was also advised to leave Paris and return to Warsaw, Poland. She refused. That same month in Brussels, the Solvay Conference brought together 23 of the world's leading scientific minds, plus Ernest Solvay himself, the industrial chemist and philanthropist who made the event possible. Among the attendees were Ernest Rutherford, who discovered the atomic nucleus; Henri Poincaré, the brilliant mathematician; Albert Einstein, with his groundbreaking theory of relativity; and Paul Langevin, who would later develop ultrasonics. Marie Curie was the only woman in the room. After the conference, Marie and Einstein became close friends. Einstein wrote her a letter, telling her to ignore the gossip and remember that her work mattered far more than any rumor. Marie eventually ended her relationship with Paul, and he returned to his wife for a time. When World War I erupted in 1914, Marie turned her knowledge into a tool for saving lives. She designed mobile X-ray units using cars, known as little Curies, to help doctors locate bullets and broken bones on the battlefield. She personally trained hundreds of women, including her teenage daughter, Irene, to use them, often driving to the front lines herself. Marie's efforts saved countless soldiers. She helped establish around 200 radiology centers during the war. Interesting fact: the story behind the Radium Girls. When radium was first discovered, its true dangers were not yet understood. Many believed it was a miracle element added to toothpaste, hair dye, and even health tonics. By the 1920s, companies were still selling chocolate bars and mouthwash claiming to contain radium. Around 1917, a group of young women working in watch factories were told to use their lips to shape their paintbrushes to a fine point. They were painting watch dials with a glow-in-the-dark, radium-based paint, and were told it was harmless. But each time they licked the brushes, they swallowed tiny amounts of radioactive material. Over time, the radium ate away at their bones, causing devastating illnesses, rotting jaws, brittle bones, and cancers. Many of these brave women became known as the Radium Girls. Their fight for justice led to lawsuits, public outrage, and eventually new safety laws and workplace protections that saved countless lives in the decades to follow. The rest of her life was devoted to studying the chemistry of radioactive substances and their power to heal. In her later years, Marie founded the Radium Institute in Paris, a pioneering center for cancer research and medicine. Though she never realized the full danger of radiation, years of exposure slowly took a toll on her health. Interesting fact: the power and peril of radiation. When Marie Curie began her work, the dangers of radiation were unknown. Advanced testing proved high doses of radiation are extremely dangerous, but also has incredible benefits in the right dose. Medical uses: X-rays, CT scans, and nuclear medicine imaging. This helps doctors see inside the human body to diagnose tumors, infections, and bone fractures. Treatment: radiation is used to destroy cancer cells and shrink tumors. Targeted radiation therapy can be done by implanting radioactive isotopes in specific tissue. Industrial: radiation is used to inspect pipes, etc. for defects without damaging them. Sterilization: kills bacteria and viruses. Research and development: archaeological dating, used to determine the age of fossils and artifacts. Food preservation: kills spoilage organisms to promote shelf life. Other uses: airport security scanners to detect explosives, etc. Nuclear power generators, smoke detectors, exit signs. In Passy, France, while resting at the Saint-Selmoz sanatorium, Madame Curie passed away on July 4, 1934, at the age of 66. Years of radiation exposure had damaged her health, and Marie died of aplastic anemia from this prolonged exposure. But her light never dimmed. Madame Marie Curie was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize and the only person ever to win in 2 different sciences. Her discoveries gave the world new hope in medicine and a deeper understanding of the universe itself. Madame Curie's brilliance still shines today, reminding us that curiosity and courage can illuminate even the darkest unknowns. From a tiny Paris laboratory to the pages of history, Madame Marie Curie's story glows eternal. Interesting fact: how long will radium glow? Marie Curie's notebooks, lab coats, and even her furniture are still kept in lead-lined boxes in Paris, because they remain radioactive to this day, still faintly glowing with traces of the radium she discovered. It is thought that these items will be radioactive for 1,500 years. Coming up next, Florence Nightingale. What would you do if your rich family forbade you from following your calling? She didn't give up, and what she did changed healthcare forever. Don't miss her incredible story. If this story inspired you, join us as we continue uncovering the lives of women who changed the world. Subscribe to Heroines of History and keep the light of history alive. And let us know in the comments who your favorite heroine is.